All right, so we're back again, and now we've got tip 6, which is following on again from yesterday's tip 5, because that's how numbers work, 5 then 6. So now we're going to talk about overload strategies. Yesterday we were talking about accidental compensations, where you are modifying some of these variables accidentally or without awareness, and it's holding you back. It's preventing you from overloading. Whereas today we're going to look at some of these things and say, like, how can we modify these on purpose to create overload? And if we're thinking about being in this intermediate training phase, then overload is what it's all about. Overload, recover, and then improve, because it's no longer so easy. It's the beginner phase where you just turn up. So now we have to have a plan, and we need to realize how to challenge our bodies correctly. All right, so remember, we're talking about training here. We're going to challenge our body, overload, and then adapt. All right, so here we can turn movement. So how are we, of course, if we're thinking squat, I'm going to take back squat, and I want to improve my back squat. Do we just do back squats all the time? That's one option, of course, and you can certainly make a lot of progress with that. But there are other ways. Training a box squat, for example, or a front squat, or a kettlebell squat. There's hundreds of different squat variations, or lunges, or anything. But understand that you can modify and change the movement that will help and support your main goal. So main goal, back squat in this example, but doesn't mean we can only train back squats to improve that. And we'll get into some ideas a bit more later on, especially when we talk about weaknesses there. But that's possible. Now, range of motion. Another good way of overloading, let's stick with back squat, is, all right, I know that the top half of my squat is where I'm weakest, or the middle part of the squat pretty commonly is the challenging part. So again, something like a partial range of motion squat or a box squat can really target that position and overload that particular position, which then is going to allow you to build the back squat more completely. And it could carry, we could talk about all kinds of other movements with the same idea, but it's pretty normal to have some part of the range of motion that's more challenging than the other, and you can target that with specific training movements and strategies to hit that spot. Now, where this is different from yesterday is, or the previous tip, is that now you're doing it on purpose. It has a reason there. Hey, I'm deliberately going to do half squats because that's what I'm training to build my full squat, which is going to be the test. So that's the difference. You must understand that doing something to avoid something is not a good strategy, but doing it on purpose is a very good strategy. Then technique and quality. So quality we want to maintain, and we covered that yesterday, that again, sometimes there's a little bit gray area, but usually, we're talking good enough technique that it's close, it's safe, and then you're going to overload with that. But if we're talking techniques, there are hundreds of different variations. So let's take a deadlift again. We can talk about a mixed grip, regular grip, wide, all kinds of different stances, grips, equipment, all kinds of different stuff. We'll get into equipment a bit in a moment, but those things can all be modified to address what you're trying to overload. So the regular deadlift grip, for example, the double overhand for most people is a little bit more challenging than the mixed hockey grip. So we can force ourselves to use this grip because maybe it's going to allow you to overload grip, and that's going to challenge the body how we want to challenge it. Now equipment, another big one. So here, all endless possibilities. Obviously some big ones like what type of bar are you using? Are you using, if we're talking pull-up bar, are we using a fat bar, regular bar? Are we using ropes or rings to do our pull-ups? There's hundreds of options. And that, again, they're just great ways to overload and challenge your body to address that main thing, which, hey, I want to improve my pull-up power, and now I'm going to specifically make it a bit more challenging by using a fat bar for a few weeks and do a training progression with that, and then I'm going to go back to the regular bar and hopefully see some progress there. Belts we mentioned yesterday and probably ruffled a few feathers, but you could do a training cycle with a belt. maybe it allows you to lift a few more kilos, and then you go back and remove the belt, and you're going to see some progress with your unbelted movements. Because there's nothing wrong with those sort of things, those changes. It's got to be in the plan, and you must understand that it's different. And because of that difference, you can't compare it. Apples and oranges situation that, yeah, you can build it up and do one thing, and then you go back and test something else. And that's the important thing. Splits, yeah, so there's many different ways. Often in training cycles, you'll do things like, instead of doing just a 3 rep max, maybe you're going to do 3, let's try again. You're going to do 1, 1, 1, something like that with short pauses, these like cluster sets. So a cluster set is a different challenge here. So you're splitting, instead of doing 3 touch and go, you're doing 3 quick singles if you like. And that's a way, again, of overloading there. It's going to give you a different challenge. Yesterday's example with push-ups, same thing. If the goal is to build unbroken sets, maybe you can have a plan there where you're not going to do unbroken sets every week, but you're going to do a training set of just overloading the movement overall, and then you're going to go back to your unbroken sets in a month and see how they've progressed. Now, weaknesses, obviously this is like a perfect one to overload. So if you have a specific part of your movement, let's take squat and that deep position of the squat. Now, if that's going to hold you back on all kinds of other things, if you don't address it. So having a specific training approach to overload and address that weakness is one of the best things you can do to make sure you're going to keep making progress in this intermediate stage. So bottom of the squat, we've got things like pause squats. You're going to do 1 1/4 squats. You're going to make sure you're doing goblet squats are a great one, allow you to get into deep position. But then you're going to then tie that back into the main movement, which maybe is a clean, or maybe it is just a normal front squat, or whatever it is. But you're going to make sure that you've addressed that weakness with a training progression, and then you go back and test what you want. So you're using an overload strategy to really target the thing that is holding you back. Now, during that training cycle, especially when your weaknesses, it can be very demoralizing. It can be challenging because you know that the weight on the bar is less than you could do if you were just doing a whatever, but now you're specifically targeting your weakness so that it's going to get better. And then you're going to see the benefit later. And that's the real thing there. And again, you must have a positive mindset and not get caught up on the total weight or the speed or whatever it is that you're measuring there, and realize it's just one piece you're adding to your whole fitness puzzle. And then injury, yeah, a little bit the same in this example, that if we've got something that's it's coming back from an injury, of course it's going to be limited. So you want to address that and overload it safely. So maybe it's not, in this example, the safety is very important because maybe it's not safe to come back and start doing pull-ups if you've just come back from a shoulder injury, something like that. So instead of just avoiding it totally, you're just going to come back with a gradual progression, and then you're going to be ready to go to full movement in a little bit of time. Now that's obvious, that's a rehab principle or very common thing, but it's still very important to realize that it is a training progression. So your rehab or coming back to your normal stuff should progress gradually, and there should be some kind of challenge or some kind of overload. It just might feel very different than it would if you were 100% healthy when you're doing those movements, but there's still going to be the overload there. All right, so hopefully that made sense, and we can do these things deliberately, and that's where that's a good training program will challenge these things as an overall idea to create overload in your body, and then you're going to adapt from it. So thank you again, and I hope you enjoyed this one.